Hey guys, what's going on? Inception here, and welcome to another video. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can counter opposition that uses a very high pressure type of tactics so that you can exploit whenever it is that they do that. A lot of this stuff is basically the thing about FIFA right now is that you don't necessarily have to play the gameplay to do or understand these instructions and tactics. You can kind of just like understand it from a mental point of view in real life, right? Of how you may want to deal with those situations. So let's just say, for instance, right, someone is playing with a 4-2-3-1. We're gonna go ahead and switch the players here like I normally would. So we'll just leave it like that, right? So let's just say we're playing with a 4-2-3-1, right? And their tactics is set up to do always constant pressure. Their width is like somewhat narrow, or their width is somewhat wide. The width isn't too important in this instance, or it is. It is if you're narrow, you're going to have more players closer to you to put more pressure against the opposition. But I mean, I guess some people will be playing it on a 5 most of the times, and then the depth is obviously really high, right? So let's just say that their defensive tactics is like this. Their offensive style is fast build up. Their width is, again, whatever it is that they would choose to use. Their players in the box is really high, or their corners and stuff is really, really overcommitting, right? So let's just say it's something like this around the lines of that, right? And we go to their instructions, right? And, they don't have stay back while attacking on that. They have always overlapping or join the attack on the fullback, so on and so forth, right? So let's just say that someone is playing this type of tactic against you, right? So what's going to happen, right, is if you know that they're using a 4-2-3-1, the left attacking mid, the right attacking mids, they will commit inside the box on the crosses. The cams will linger around the 18-yard box, and I just took this out, and it's probably going to reset everything now, and it didn't. Good. The cam is going to linger around the 18-yard box. Ronaldo's going to commit inside, and then the CDMs will also commit as well. So if you notice that someone is using constant pressure against you, I'm going to teach you guys how you may want to counter what they're doing. So right off the bat, right, if they're using a 4-2-3-1, you can also use a 4-2-3-1, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be of this formation. If you notice that someone is always putting this constant pressure against you, you can actually tell your attackers to stay forward, right? So you can see that there's defensive support on the striker, 3 cams, so on and so forth. So if you notice, again, if someone's attacking against you and you're really good and composed at the back and in the midfield where you have 2 solid CDMs, you may want to actually tell your players to stay forward, right? So if you tell your players to stay forward, over here, if you tell your players to stay forward in this instance, if someone is really overcommitting to you, that means that they're also leaving their back 4 or their back 3 or 2, depending on how they commit forward with their fullbacks, to completely attack against you, right? So if you do this, right, the best course of action is to keep it like this on stay forward as your attacking instruction, right? So obviously it's going to change now, but you can change that to your attacking instruction so that when someone does that against you, you'll have a good balance of attacking against them, right? So when they're stay forward, all you really need to do is with your back 4 or with your 2 CDMs, you just have to cross it to the top. Cross it to your Costa, cross it to your Dybala, cross it to your, in this situation, I'd probably use Quadrado. Cross it to your Quadrado, and that way you'll be able to make your attacking plays afterwards, right? So that's if you want to stay with the 4-2-3-1, right? Now, if you notice that their attacking is too much against you, right, and you notice that they're trying to exploit the sides or they're really trying to put the pressure against you, you can also choose the style of being really conservative and absorbing that pressure and trying to maybe nick in that 1 goal or 2 goals in, right? So what you could do, and this is going to be one of my, I'm going to switch to defensive so that I can show you guys what I would set up defensively. You can switch to the 4-2-3-1, which isn't that one. This is the more defensive version of the 4-2-3-1. And you'll notice that you can't make any subs, right? Because the players will rotate during the game. So the 11 players that you want to have players that can play in the middle and that can play on the side. You're gonna have to have at least one that can do that, right? So right now, if I were to switch Matuidi to the side here, because normally I'm using a 4-2-3-1, I can switch to this formation easily, right? And I'll be able to use the same type of formation, but a more defensive approach. So obviously, if someone's attacking against you on the sides, you want to keep your players to stay back while attacking, right? And because your CDMs are on stay back while attacking, the default is going to be on cover wing. So you're going to want to set that to cover the center, right? Because you're going to have your left mid and your right mid coming back as well. So that's just to add this extra support on the sides and in the middle of the pitch for you to be able to attack. But you want to keep your cam on balance, but your striker to stay forward, right? So this is it's defensive support. So stay forward, right? This is so that once you get the ball back, right, your players have come back on defense, but your chance creation and all these things, supporting runs, so on and so forth, is all balanced. So they're still going to attack. It's going to take longer to go forward, but it is going to be more defensive. So again, when someone is using all these tactics against you, you can choose the style of play where you're dropping back, where you're being really conservative on the defense, or where you absorb the pressure and try to nick in 1 goal or 2 goals, depending on your play style, right? Or you can be on balance, but have your width to be a little bit wide to cover the sides in the 4-2-3-1, and your depth to be somewhat more conservative, but not too conservative. You don't want to be too conservative because then your defending with your midfielders and your strikers isn't going to be too great. But if you want to be more conservative so that your strikers are closer to you on their counterattack, you can do that as well. So that's if someone is trying to put that high pressure against you. Your offensive style, again, with high pressure, if you have it on possession, this is down to your own player skill, because your own player skill is going to still take into effect, right? Your dynamic tactics isn't going to fully carry you, because if you are of similar skill, your dynamic tactics is what's going to separate you and your opponent, that and as well as luck, right? So with possession, you have to be very, very contained with how you're attacking. Now with possession, because your defensive setup is already really, really defensive with the 4-2-3-1, where you have everybody coming back and so on and so forth. This is going to be a good style for you because they're going to be really close to you and they're going to be playing very, very narrow or very wide, really close together, right? So with possession, you won't really have that many attacking space, right? Your team is going to take longer to build up because your players did push back. And when you progress forward, you're going to hit a certain point where everybody's going to be in a good position. And then that's when you can attack, right? So again, you can play this possession play style where you're very, very calm and you're dribbling and you're fine and you're comfortable on the ball. But then you can also use fast buildup. Now, fast buildup, if they're using fast pressure against you, your players will run off the ball really, really quickly, right? So this is your brain has to operate really quickly in these situations, right? So that when you make these passes, your players really exploit them behind because they decided to counter to put this high pressure against you, right? So fast buildup, where your players are moving all over the place, is going to be really, really helpful in that situation too. If you want your players to be closer from the fast buildup in a 4-2-3-1, obviously your offensive style needs to be narrow so that the players on fast buildup are closer to you, but they're really, really gunning towards the net once you get the ball back, right? So your tactics can be attacking, but your instructions can be more defensive, and then you'll see the balance between the two, right? So players in the box, obviously, you don't want to have too many players in the box because if they're, well, actually, you do. If you want to have it around this area or this area when someone is using a high pressure against you, again, because they're using high pressure, their defensive players will be more out of position. So there's a balance between whether or not you want to have players running inside the box or you don't want to have players running inside the box. So for me, for instance, I would rather have players be closer to me, so I probably switch it to this around this area here so that my CDMs are outside the 18-yard box so I can pop in some long shots to score more opportunities, right? And corners and so on, you can really overcommit on the corners because they're going to be committing on the counterattacks. Or you can just decide not to commit on the corners and then tell your players to go for the short corner. And then after the short corner, they will play to this tactic right here after the short corner is done. So that's one way of countering your opponents if you decide to do that. Now, you can also counter them, right? If they're, keeping possession of the ball in the midfield and they still want to exploit the sides from time to time, you can also switch to a 3-5-2, right? Or a 3-4-2-1, right? Where you have all this width in your team. So a 3-4-2-1 will basically allow you to really congest the midfield. You can use this one or you can use this one, which is the 3-5-2. 3-5-2 has the cams and the two center defensive mids in the left center defensive mid area and the right center defensive mid area. So in this instance right here, I would have Khedira and Matuidi, right? With Alexandro probably off to the left side, Cuadrado off to the right. Cancelo would be okay as a center back. It wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but if it did concern you that much, you could use Alexandro more as a center back, switch over Cuadrado to the left side, Cancelo to the right, and then switch off Alexandro to the left side, right? So you want to make a team that you can basically rotate amongst each other really nicely. So again, high pressure against this situation right here, your midfield is going to be more congested, and you're also going to have a little bit more width. Now, because you have a left mid and right mid, but you also have a lot of narrow-based players, you may want to decide to use your width a little bit more narrow. Reason being for that is because on high pressure situations, you want your players to be closer amongst each other, but then you also want to have that fast build-up that when you are closer amongst each other, your players are still making those really, really good offensive runs, right? So your depth can be a little bit higher or a little bit lower. You may want to keep it lower so that you're really congested in the midfield. Your back three will do their job in that 3 center back area, but your midfield is what's going to be helping you on the defensive fronts, right? So you can keep it on stay back while attacking for... You can keep it on stay back while attacking for these guys. You can have your cam to stay forward and for your left mid and your right mid to commit forward, right? So this is when you risk it all, really, really attacking against your opposition that's using high pressure against you. Because if you do that and you keep everything else on balance, right, in this situation, you may want to put Ronaldo on the right side, Dybala on the left, or actually switch that like that. When you create a situation like this, your players over here will be balanced, but they'll be still attacking really nicely, but then you'll have that extra pressure on the sides. Now, telling your left mid and right mid to get in behind it is kind of risky, right? So I think the best course of action in this situation was to tell them to come back in defense. Obviously, you want to have players that have very good stamina so that, you know, in situations like this, they can push up, push back really nicely, right? Someone with high work rates would probably be the most preferable. I loved using a Heung-min Son from previous years or the previous year of FIFA, the team of the season or team of the year version, team of the season version, where he pushes up and comes back really nicely because he has good stamina and he has good work rates to do that, right? So with this, you can tell him to come back on defense and it wouldn't necessarily be a problem because then you would be basically playing a 5-2-1-2, right? Which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing because they would still commit forward in certain areas, but they will come back and push back on defense if you really need that extra help on the sides. But again, your tactics and instructions, they go together, so you have to be very careful with these things, right? So personally, I would keep the chance creation on balance, but then the strikers and the cams, the cam I would like to stay forward, but the strikers I'd like for them to be on balance because normally on balance, they usually stay forward, they don't really push back. So if you have your cam to stay forward, if someone's using that high pressure against you, again, you can cross the ball towards them and then you can use the sides and have your strikers also commit this extra pressure on their back four as well. So it's all about a chess game. Like I said, I always mention this in different videos, but it's definitely going to be the case for most times in this game. So this is another way that you can counter against your opponent. A really, really good counter against your opponent if you want to attack against them or, you know, they're being very, very defensive minded is, you know, you can use a very 4-1-2-2 type formation, right? If you use the 4-1-2-2, and again, they're using that counter, those high pressure tactics, what you can actually do in this situation is you can make your CDM to stay back while attacking, and this is an attacking-minded, high-pressure situation because the way that I would see the high-pressure situation is I can easily attack against them if they're doing it against me. I was doing it against people in the demo when people were trying to use this high pressure against me, and my tactics were already set to be basically counter what they were doing, right? So stay back while attacking on the CDMs, balanced on the fullbacks, right? And you have to be very careful when you use balance on the fullbacks. Right here in this situation, I'd probably switch off Alexandro wherever he is off to the side here. Khedira would obviously play in the midfield, and then Cancelo off to the side here, blah, 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 right? So again, I can switch to this formation because the players in the team are already very good and they can occupy those spots, right? I'd probably switch off Matuidi over here to the side, Cuadrado over here to the right side, and then that way I can have Khedira as a CDM, so on and so forth, right? So the instruction for this could be set to stay back while, or to balance on balance fullback, CDM to stay back while attacking, right? Your cam to stay forward, and then everything else to keep on balance so that, again, you can pass the ball forward with someone like Khedira or your back four, and then you can progress forward if someone is always overcommitting with their players, right? Again, your instructions isn't the only thing that's going to be important here. Your tactics will also be very important, right? So in this situation right here, because I'm using the 4-1-2-1-2, I'll be more vulnerable to the sides, right? So obviously I want to have the width to be higher, right? Because you have the CDM and the center mids in the middle area, but then you also want your depth to be around this general area over here, depending, right? Fast buildup will be very good for the 4-1-2 and 2 because your strikers will really commit forward, especially since you have the 2 strikers and the cam to offensively attack your opposition if they choose to use that high pressure again, right? The width from a 4-1-2 and 2, you might as well keep it a little bit more narrow because 4-1-2 and 2, you want to congest the midfield a lot, right? But then also from the attack, you want to have your fullbacks a little bit wide, right? So they can give you that extra pressure because the thing about the 4-1-2 and 2 is that you have no width play. It's all about the middle, right? So you want to be able to use the players on the sides, like your fullbacks, to be able to commit on the attack as well. So I would recommend using fast buildup or possession or long passes, because on the long ball, once you get possession of the ball, your players will run away from you, so you can do nice little LBYs to your players, making the runs in behind, especially with players like Ronaldo, Douglas Costa, Dybala. They're going to be doing a very good job at doing that. Now, again, physical presence, pace, dribbling, going to be very important features when it comes to these types of situations. Players in the box, you may want to not commit too much with the 4-1-2 and 2. You may want to have some midfielders, right? So I would probably keep it on a 3, and then your corners on a 1, and your free kicks on a 1 as well, right? So you got to find a way to balance out your opposition, right? I'm going to figure this out once I get the full game of what types of tactics they're going to want in each situation. Because obviously when you play the foot draft, they're probably going to give you an option to use ultra attacking, defensive, ultra defensive tactics, but you'll obviously probably be limited to the same formation that you are given in the foot draft. You won't be able to switch to a different formation. So that's also going to be very fun to do. Foot drafts is going to be a very good way of experimenting in what types of situations I'm going to want to do different things, right? So that's also a different way that you can attack against them. Another conservative way of basically allowing your opposition to attack against you while you're being more conservative is to use I'm trying to look for the formation right now. I wouldn't necessarily recommend 5 at the back, because the 5 at the back is not healthy for the middle of the pitch, and the middle of the pitch is the most important part of the pitch, right? So you take that into account, right? You can also use a 4-2-4 to tell all your 4 players up top to stay forward, so that way, again, when they're high pressuring up against you, all you need to do is cross it forward, lay it off to the sides with a header or something, or head it back, and then your players will commit forward on the attack, right? So that's another attacking style. But the style that I want is basically I'm trying to look for it right now. 4-5-1 flat would work out really nicely. That's kind of the formation that I was looking for, or 4-1-4-1. There you go. So 4-1-4-1, you're really, really congesting that midfield at this point, right? And you're really just playing defensive, right? So your instructions, I can already see people making fun of the fact that I say right all the time. By the way, guys, I repeat my words a lot because I stream, so that's why, kind of do it a lot. It's just kind of like a habit at this point. So instructions, you can be very conservative. Again, stay back while attacking, right? Stay back while attacking on your 2 center mid. Stay back while attacking on your CDM. Come back on defense for your left mid and right mid. But then always keep that player up top to stay forward, unless you really, really need to hold on to a result and you tell him to come back in defense and to stay central, I would say, or false 9 and then stay central, so that you know exactly where that player is going to be when he's coming back. So you can counter against someone that's using high pressure by also being very conservative on the defense. So it depends on whatever style you want. You either choose an attacking formation where you want to exploit them in their defensive area if they're over attack or over committing on you on the attack, or you can be the conservative type where your build-up will be a little bit more slower, but it'll be very useful to attack against your opposition if they choose to do that. So high pressure is a situation that I know that people are they're going to feel the pressure, right, when someone attacks against them and they're trying to pull all the pressure. But try to remain as calm and focused as you need to be, right? Because, again, people are going to screw up when they use constant pressure, and when they do, that's when you need to exploit them on the attack, right? So just to keep that in mind when you are playing FIFA, and it'll work out really nicely for you. But that's ways that you can use, to counter against your opponent when you're using high pressure. There's multiple ways that you can counter against it if someone's using it. It just depends on the play style that you decide to use. But that is going to conclude the video for today, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you guys want to see a I think what's the other one I was going to do? An attacking style where someone is trying to waste time against you. I can also make a video for that if you guys are interested in that. But that is going to conclude the video for today, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you guys did, please drop a thumbs up on it. Definitely helps out the channel a lot. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.